back to Sports Desk. Now, there are less than, I can't believe this actually, 250 days until the World Cup begins in North America. And of course, the endless question is, will England end what will be now a 60-year wait for a World Cup triumph? Thomas Tuchel certainly has plenty to think about before then. The man alongside me, Ian Foster, has had success at World Cups and Euros with England youth teams. So delighted to have you with us this afternoon. I mean, there's so much at this point for Thomas Tuchel to think about. Obviously, he's got an ongoing qualifying campaign anyway, but it's going well for England. 5 wins out of 5, quite clear in the group, could be sealed relatively soon. But how much of the planning will have already been done this far out from a World Cup, 250 days to go? And what are the details that Thomas Tuchel will be sort of focusing on right now?
I don't think Thomas will take his mind off qualification. I think it can be achieved next month.
Yep.
So I think he'll be really laser focused on that. In the background, logistically, I imagine team operations are in the US, Canada and Mexico, looking at training venues, stadiums, hotels, etc. It really kicks into gear and the strategies will kick in once they've qualified and then once the draw happens. Because it's over such a huge area. It's the complete opposite to how it was in Qatar, where it was basically just on one street almost. But they'll be able to have a robust plan, a really robust plan. They've obviously got a plan that they've used in Russia and then into Qatar. So they'll be well versed on travel and everything else.
It's something that you yourself would have an input into in your role, that actually you have a real opinion and that you can have almost a decisive vote on where a team is based on obviously their games, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think what England have done previously, and I travelled with the squad to Qatar, is they want a hotel that's just theirs, and in order to get that, you have to perhaps just stay a little bit further out of the way, which is fine. They're used to that. When they have St George's Park, there's no guests on site, so it's what the players want. They can relax. So the coach will have an input on geographically where they need to be in terms of the training venue and how far away that is.
And I guess any modifications that need to be made, because you're going abroad, so you don't know necessarily what you're dealing with. You'll want to make it your own. Yeah,
exactly.
As well as being solely
and everything is planned down to the branding. Everything. When the players arrive at the hotel, it'll look like an England. It'll feel like home.
And that's important in terms of just their sort of a recognisable context that is familiar to them, that will allow them to. All these tiny details add up, don't they? But it seems like at this point, when we look at major tournament form, in the Gareth Southgate reign, England sort of rediscover their knack to go deep. How important do you think that experience will be in an expanded World Cup in the US?
Well, what's happened throughout my experiences throughout the pathway is that teams have now gone to finals and been successful. So players who've been through the pathway, most of them have, will lean on experiences from there. Those boys who've been in the last 2 finals, great experiences of going all the way to the final. I think what's important perhaps for Thomas Tuchel and his staff, I was slightly surprised that, and I don't want hate mail from Wales here, but that the opposition they chose for the friendly game last night, Thomas is 7 games into what will perhaps be a 14-game lead into a World Cup. I thought they might have gone against a Tier 1 opponent, perhaps Spain, Germany, Italy, France, because I'm not sure today how much they've learnt from yesterday's game. The performance was outstanding, really good. They did what needed to be done. But against Tier 1 opponents, they'll get a lot more challenges. So it'll be interesting to see in March and then leading into the World Cup what level of opposition they get.
You've worked with a number of the players who are in this current senior setup, winning the Euro under-19s, also the under-17 World Cup in India. So we had, for example, Phil Foden, Marc Guehi. What sort of role, how big a role do you expect those two to play in the US, Mexico and Canada?
Marc Guehi is as good a leader and personality as you could wish to have. I really think the performance of him and John Stones last night looked as good as it gets from a centre-back pairing in England. So I'm pleased for Marc. He's one of the good guys. he's thriving now at the very highest level. Hopefully Phil comes back into the mix soon, because he's one of the world's best. He really, really is. And we have to find a position for Phil in the team. And hopefully Thomas can do that. So the positive thing for me is the competition for places. A lot of people speak about the players that aren't currently in the squad.
Yes, Jude Bellingham, for example.
Obviously, Jude, Cole's not in there at the moment, Phil's not in there, Jack Grealish isn't in there, Adam Wharton's not in there, Trent Alexander-Arnold's not in there, Tino Livermento's not in there.
You could almost name 2 England squads, couldn't you, for this World Cup?
You could, and I think one of the main challenges, and we've had it since the so-called golden generation, is how do we shoehorn our best players into the team. And what I would say is I don't think Thomas and his staff will want to be trying to work that out in the tournament.
No.
So
you'll need to know that ahead of.
Yeah, so I imagine there'll be changes to the group in November. Hopefully he goes as strong as he possibly can, and then we'll see how he gets this embarrassment of riches into the team.
But there's always a mitigating factor. There's always injuries or things like that we've seen, of course, in past tournaments. A couple more individuals to mention. Elliot Anderson, Morgan Rodgers. They have really impressed since being in that England setup at the senior level, and especially Anderson. I mean, who can be that foil to Declan Rice? Seems he's putting a very compelling case right now, Ian.
Well, I actually brought Elliot in for the first time at under 19 level. He was more of an attacking midfield player then, an advanced 8 or a number 10. He's really thriving in that role at the moment. And I think, going back to the level of opposition, it would have been nice to have seen Elliot perhaps against one of the top nations and see how he fits into that role. There's not much competition for that number 6 role, if that's the way he's going to play. Adam Wharton is another young player.
And if Declan's going to be more of an 8, then...
I'd imagine, Listen, if you want players who play there for the clubs, and, Declan plays in an advanced number 8 role for Arsenal with Zubimendi in that role. So you don't really want him sitting in front of the back 4. You want him doing what he does for his club week in, week out. I'd probably say there's 2 positions in the team, the number 6 and perhaps the left back position, where you're not really sure how they're going to fill those. Yeah. Again, deep into tournaments, the left backs, if you like, that they've got in the squad aren't traditionally left backs. Miles Lewis-Skelly is a central midfield player who's playing in there. Nico O'Reilly got called up into the squad, who's very, very similar. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in both of those positions. But Elliot's looks like he's in possession of the shares. He's doing incredibly well. And then you mentioned Morgan. Morgan's somebody I worked with for a couple of years. Great kid, unbelievable talent. He's a dual roller, if you like. So in tournament football, he's worth his weight in gold. He can play off the side. He can play as an advanced 8. He could probably do the false 9 position.
I was going to say, Thomas Tuchel must love someone like that who can just operate in different scenarios.
Absolutely.
That versus
in tournament football, those players who can dual role are worth the weight in gold. Really, really are.
Can I just ask about other little factors? I mean, you must have been watching the Club World Cup and seeing the conditions out there for the players. Having matches disrupted, them having to play in extreme heat, or the opposite, which the thunder and lightning, etc. I wonder how much does that play into someone's thinking like Thomas Tuchel, in terms of preparation for this tournament? Could it affect the way that England this tournament play, especially with the heat factor?
Potentially, depending on the tough. There's talk of the kick-offs being moved now, and they seem to have learnt from the conditions that they had in the Club World Cup. What I would say is that the medical department at the FA is world class. They will have all sorts of strategies in terms of recovery, dealing with heat, and the manager is tactically outstanding, so he'll know when to dial it up in certain conditions and when perhaps to turn it down. Yeah.
Just on a completely different topic, you worked alongside Steven Gerrard out in the Saudi Pro League, and we understand that he's having further talks about a potential return to Rangers, where of course he was so successful that one season with the unbeaten league campaign to win it for Rangers. What was he like to work with, but also how much do you think he would relish this challenge of entering again, but with the club in a very different situation?
Well, he's an icon of the sport, first and foremost, so to work with him is great. He's so enthusiastic about the game, he's so open-minded about where he works, how he works, who he works with. He commands respect, like I say, an icon of the sport. So when he walks into the dressing room, he's got everybody's attention. It's sad to see him out of the game. You know, someone who's enthusiastic and as talented as he is. I understand why Rangers Football Club will be wanting to speak to Steven after the huge success he had there. It will be a feel-good factor that perhaps is not at the club at the moment. He will bring that back. So it's interesting to see whether he goes, but I'd love to see him back in the game soon, and hopefully if he goes to Rangers, I'm sure it'll be a great success.
Yeah, he says he's looking for the right opportunity, but if it's not there, he won't force it, he won't jump in, but if it is the right one, then it's very much on his radar and things can move quickly. Ian, how fascinating. Great to speak to you.
My pleasure.
Please do come back soon, especially as we get towards that World Cup. It would be great to speak to you again.
Cheers, David. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.